Here we are for another installment of Ben Live. And I am so excited for this one because it's really sandwiched between Black History Month and, of course, the beginning of Women's History Month. And I'm so excited to bring here today one of the most dynamic and prolific activists that we've seen of this generation, one who has been on the front lines of change and with her bravery and just her heroic servitude to fight for social equality. So we're really excited to bring today Tamika D. Mallory, activist
Hello,
and
sister.
movement strategist.
How are you?
I am wonderful. Thank you so much for
Awesome.
joining us. I'm really excited about this conversation because there's so many topics to cover with you. When we talked about who we wanted to be our keynote speaker, and really, bring a message across during this pivotal time between Black History Month and Women's History Month, and of course, there is no ignoring the struggles and the parallels between the struggles that we have seen. You were the first person who came to mind because you have been at the forefront, as I mentioned, just fighting for social equality on both sides. So for those of you who are not familiar and couldn't understand how anyone cannot be familiar with Tamika, she, as you may know, she was one of the four co-chairs of the Women's March in 2017, and also co-founded Until Freedom, which is an intersectional social justice organization that serves as a clearinghouse for organizers, activists, movement attorneys, artists, celebrities, and of course, formerly incarcerated individuals. It is a huge movement. And as a movement strategist, Tamika has done an amazing job of bringing that movement to life. But I have to ask because I'm looking at you, and I know we are very blessed by genetics and the beautiful melanin of our skin. But you look
we
way too
we
young to be
are.
doing
You
all of
are.
this. Thank you. I mean, it's so amazing that you've been able to do this over the course of your life. Please share with us a little bit about your rise as an activist. How did you come to be in this space?
Oh wow. It's 26 years later now. So when you ask that question, it's like quickly things run across my mind. First of all, let me just say thank you. Thank you to you, Vanessa, for all that you do. And you are. This is not a space that you're in just because you're at work. You are in this space all the time, uplifting women, helping people and bringing people together and always supporting me. So I just want to say, thank you again. And to the entire Ben family, thanks for having me on today. Women's History Month is certainly a special time for us to go back and recall the history of us as women, where we come from, how we end up in these different places along our journey. And so when you say, what's the story? The story is so broad and but I want to give my parents most of the credit for where I stand today, because my parents, when I was very young, I mean, they raised me in the hood, so to speak, but I certainly was never left with the hood mindset. I was always left to understand and was led to understand the need for community, the need for community empowerment. And so my parents, they were the type of people who every single day there was something going on. We were going to the police precinct to meet the captain in that area and learn more about what's happening in the community and how my parents could be helpful. We were going to any kind of community events. We were even on the streets of New York, walking around, meeting community people, and just finding ways to always be involved. When I was young, of course, that felt like prison, because I was like, I want to hang out, I want to have my friends. But as I got older, very similar, and I always use the reference to church so that people will understand, and folks go, oh yeah, I remember that. When you're young and your parents take you to church, you're
Mhm.
there because they want to be there and you've been told you have to be. You
Right.
go because you have no other choice. I don't know about other folks listening, but I know that when you're a young girl growing up, going to church on Sunday is not an
That's what you
optional
do.
thing,
Right.
and you better have a positive attitude as well. And so my parents were very much like that with the movement. And when I was young, it was their movement, very similar to your spirituality. When you're young,
Right.
it's your parents. You're following who's sort of leading you and teaching you. But as you go through life, all of us become a lot more connected to that spirituality because we've got our own situations that occur, and we begin to understand those spirituals, those words, and that inspiration
Right.
in a different way. It becomes near and dear to your heart. So, by the time I was 18, and my son's father was murdered, I think that for me was like the spark of my own social justice world, if you will. I was like immersed because then I understood that his story wasn't he wasn't a single what I want to say, it wasn't an anomaly. He wasn't just this one person who died and it just, oh, poor me. He was a part of a larger narrative of a system failing Black men. And while he wasn't killed by police, he was killed by other Black men. Nonetheless, when you start to peel back the layers of all of their stories, and I
Mm.
did that work from that young, I was doing the work because of where I had been raised and how I had been raised, of
Mm.
actually caring about the shooters as much as I did my own loved one. And so as I began to
Mm.
do the research and learning more about these young men, I realized that the system failed all of them. And it turned me into the activist that you see today. That I have the sensitivity and the understanding of what our people and what people in general are facing, that puts hate in their heart, and that allows them to take the lives of others. And while I
Mm.
don't think it's right, it still makes me someone who I believe has the compassion to not just fight for justice, but to also insist that we're constantly calling ourselves to healing,
Mm.
as a people, as a nation. So, I don't know if that's really the answer to where it comes from, but it's probably, I don't want to bore you with, well, when I was 8 years old, this happened. And when I was 12, it's more so in the greater context that it's my life's work. It's
Yes.
my life's work.
Yeah, I think that's amazing. I feel everybody comes into their calling at different times in their lives, but
Mm-hmm.
you, and we are grateful for this, that you came into your calling at a very early age, enough to be able to serve not just as a voice, but as a generational voice, a voice that
Absolutely.
people of all, various ages can really tap into and understand. And I think that kind of leads me to, the thought about intersectionality, because so at
Yeah.
Ben, and in our DE&I efforts, I look at diversity very holistically, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
not just about black and white. It's not just about the LGBTQ community. It's about diversibility. It's about veterans. It's about people who come from the AAPI community, and it's about ageism, right? So how does intersectionality kind of play in the space of activism for you? How do you slice and dice how your voice penetrates these different areas?
Yeah. So the question of intersectionality is probably one of the most important organizing tools that we have at our disposal. When I think about Kimberly Crenshaw, who was a professor at UCLA and also one of the greatest minds in terms of feminism in this nation, a Black woman, she's the one who coined the term intersectionality. And I can tell you that when I first heard it, it was so necessary because I was planning the Women's March and in the midst of feeling like I should run off of the roof of a building. That's literally the stress and the feeling of discomfort that I was experiencing every day, because I was what is the proper way for me, because I was in a space as a very conscious woman with many other women who were not conscious at all, but had
Mm.
found themselves becoming leaders in a movement overnight. And I was trying to figure out how to deal with the ignorant questions, the suppression of my voice and ideas. Of
Mm.
course, you know, I was the angry Black woman because I dared to say things like, I refuse to be involved in a movement that is about Trump. Like I won't even participate in
Mm.
anything where that is the sort of like the focus of the movement, because I knew and understand very well, and many of them do now also, that Donald Trump wasn't the beginning of racism, sexism, and all the other isms that we were fighting against in this country. He was a symptom of it as well. And so I refused to be a part of a women's movement that was about Trump. And there, that was very difficult for them because it was much easier, particularly for these white women, to focus on one individual, one issue, and to say that racism existed because one man was choosing to, to speak a certain way and do certain things. And I wouldn't do that. And so, because of myself and other women of color who were very conscious and had been in the movement for a long time, we were saying, no, 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 we need to talk about this as a whole, which would make you then have to call into question your mother's behavior, your own behavior, where you
Mm.
work, the people you're around, the types of conversations that you allow to take place around you, the privilege that you personally have. And people were like, whoa, that's a little bit
Right.
too much. So we were, it was a lot of stress and a lot of tension constantly. And what helped us was the concept of intersectionality. And the reason why is because we all begin to understand it's not about forcing someone to accept your movement as the whole movement, right?
Mhm.
Each one of us have different points. We all have different things we're coming to the table with. Some people care about education. Other people care about police accountability. Some people care about health. Other people care about equal pay. Can we all come to the table understanding that there is a larger context, a broader context about our nation, and how divided we are, and how many people are suffering as a result of very systemic issues in this
Right.
nation? But is it possible for us to break down the barriers of of individualism, that
Mhm.
only my thing counts, and my
Mm.
issue is more important than yours, and my pain, which is also a very, very important part of this concept around intersectionality, because oftentimes we find ourselves in a oppression Olympics game. Well, my
Mm.
pain is worse. Well, Vanessa, your family may be from a different place, a different part of our world. And so, you've been through more than me. When in fact, all of us are suffering in some way as women in general. And that's
Mm.
what helped us get to almost 7 million people around the world. That we provided entry points for people to come to the table from many different backgrounds and touch points. But what we would never allow is for folks to come there and to be a part of something, not understanding and having to face every day that we're dealing with biases and oppression that's coming from even within this group of women who are meeting at the table every single day. And that's what made it hard. But in the end, the fact that 7 million people around this world gathered, and that's this is the largest organized protest and gathering in the history of this nation. That
Yes.
tells me that intersectionality works, because people are able to put down their burden and be concerned with the burden of another as if it
Mm.
is their own, even if it's just for one historic moment.
Yes, absolutely agree with that. I mean, I believe ran across a quote, I believe it was in Forbes, that you shared, we can't receive justice if we're not able to collaborate with other races, people from different backgrounds to stand in solidarity. What an amazing statement that speaks to the melting pot that we're all in, but
Yeah.
it's got to be hard though. I mean, to what degree do you feel, there's a responsibility that's put upon you, right? To be a voice for so many different areas and for so many people. Do you feel like you put that upon yourself? Do you feel like the outside or societal pressures kind of maintain that Tamika is the voice of so many? How do you feel about that?
Well, also the quote that you just said is in my book, State of Emergency.
That's
That
right.
if you saw it in Forbes, that's where they got it from.
Yeah.
And you know, I take on what I know God has called me to do. Trust and believe. There have been many days when I have said I'm closing shop. You know, to hell with this whole movement. Even our own people, as Black and brown folks, can be very stressful because there's so much trauma and pain that we all experience every day. And as
Right.
soon as we see someone rise as a voice, as a leader, we go to that individual with all of our the full force of every issue. And if you are not speaking to it a certain way or at a certain time and the way people want you to, or dealing with their trauma in a certain way, we inflict pain even on our own. Like, that's just what it is. So there are days when I'm like, listen, I'm smart. I have transferable skills. I think that's what y'all call it in the corporate world.
That's
That
right.
I have skills that can, move in different rooms. I'm a great convener. I'm a great writer. I'm a great speaker. I get offered opportunities and positions in different places all the time. Not as much anymore because now, there's a target that is on me because I have dared to speak truth to power. But there
Wow.
was a time, maybe, prior to George Floyd being murdered, where I was getting calls every single day with people like, you should come over and work on this team. We should start this thing. And, of course, I still have lots of companies and individuals who come to me for diversity training and ideas and strategic development and planning, because that's what I do. So why in the world do I need to keep myself in the fire every day that I have to experience the death threats and the trolling online, the harassment that I go through? Why would I put myself through all of that when I could go get a comfortable paycheck from somewhere and, work virtually from an island, right? Because I have friends that do that. They live that way. And I'm like, how exactly does it work? But when you are living in your calling, even when you attempt to separate and to do, the things I just said, you get pulled back. You
Yeah.
always get pulled back. And that's what happens to me. I'm constantly saying, you know what, for the next 6 months, I'm just going to focus on, whatever else, something different. It's the same thing when I was writing State of Emergency. I was committed to taking time so that I could write my book and really pour in my experiences and, just everything that I believe about this nation and how we can be a better society. And
Right.
then Breonna Taylor was killed, and I ended up having to live in Louisville, Kentucky for 4 months in the midst of the biggest fight of my life while still writing because I had a deadline. And that's because this is, and in fact, in the book, the pain and the experience of organizing for Breonna Taylor's family and, for justice for Breonna Taylor, it almost made the book better. When you're reading the book, I'm going through it instead of recalling from a previous time. I'm actually living in it at that time. And
Right.
so the book has my tears and my soul in the material. And that for me, in fact, just thinking about the the forward of my book is a conversation between Cardi B and Dr. Angela
Yes.
Davis. The day that I spoke to Cardi B on the telephone to get her to commit, there was literally police surveillance on my house that I was living in Louisville. And I was in the basement of the house talking to Cardi on the phone, afraid that the conversation I was having with her was being tapped in from the outside surveillance. So I was like in the basement trying to have a, now someone told me later they can hear you in the basement too. But I ran to the basement believing that somehow I was stopping people from listening because they were listening into our home. They could
Right.
do that with drones and other equipment. So it's things like that that people don't even think about. To you, or not you but others, it's not realistic, and in fact it sounds kind of crazy, right? But that was my experience, and that all happened while I was in the process of writing this book. So no, I don't always want it. I don't always want
Right.
it. Sometimes I want to walk away, but no matter what it is that I do, it seems that it's always specifically my skill and my voice that is needed. And I know I'm talking long on
Mm.
this point, but this is a
Yeah.
really passionate question for me. I'm just thinking about the speech that I made in Minneapolis when George Floyd was killed. This speech went viral so many times, and still till now, this is, however long later, I still have this speech goes viral at different moments on the internet, where I just find people tagging me in thousands of posts about what I said. I didn't prepare one word of that speech. Any other time that I speak, I drive myself crazy, writing everything, reading
Mm.
it over and over, telling other people, getting opinions from here or there about should I say this? What should I say? This particular day, I walked to a press conference and was asked to speak right then. And I just said what was in my heart. And from then on, and to be clear, prior to that, I had been through the Women's March trauma and was really trying to figure out what's next for me. I didn't feel
Right.
like I could return in the same way that I was within the Women's March, because everything I went through said God wants me to do something different. And then I
Mm.
went and got in front of a microphone, said whatever was on my heart. And the next thing you know, I'm viral on the internet at millions and millions and millions of people around the world saying, tell us more about,
Mhm.
how you feel and how you see this nation. And people who had been adamantly against everything that I said in the past became allies.
That's right.
So that's not me. That's something that God has done for me. And I just have to walk in it and accept that that's just what it is. I can't get out. I
Right.
can't.
No, you know what? I get that. I get that for you. And I wasn't going to dive into this area so quickly. But I think you bring up like a really good point about just, what you went through during that period. Some of which I know firsthand. Um, because of our association with
Yeah.
each other. But it's really, that was a pivotal time for so many people. The words you spoke, the truth you spoke was piercing. It was piercing to many people. And I think what was most important about that is the fact that you weren't necessarily preaching to us. You were
Mm-mm.
in the words that you were using, and the passion in which you delivered it. You ended up converting people and their thought processes around biases. I myself saw it. I can speak to, what happened in my workspace during that time. And I will never forget several Zoom meetings. We could not work as usual, could not happen
That's right. That's right.
because yes, the whole world was watching, but not only was the whole world watching, you made it so important for the whole world to listen to what was being said and what you were saying. And our truth that you spoke to the hearts of so many people, that not only was it the fact that George Floyd had been brutally murdered, but that this was not an isolated incident. This
Mm-hmm.
was something that
Mm-hmm.
had been
Mm-hmm.
carried on for years,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
people were
Mm-hmm.
documenting it now, and people were seeing it now, and you were showing that this has been happening all along. It was so important. People were stopping what they were doing. They were reaching out to us, checking to make sure that all, people of color in our workspace were okay. Many of them were touched to the point they felt so deeply, um, that we would show up on meetings and people would just burst into tears because they
Oh
didn't
yeah.
know how to handle the gravity of the world that we were living in. So, I said it to you before about being a generational voice, right? Um, and the fact that you have Cardi B and Angela Davis in the forwards of State of Emergency, I think further speaks to that. You captured the hearts of young people in general, of all colors, right? And you also you brought stirred feelings in those who had gone through their own movements and pulled them back in, and the ones who'd never joined a movement before. They saw the
Yeah.
importance of it, which,
Yeah.
we can do nothing but, I'm looking at the screen here for people just saying thank you, thank you, thank you. I don't know if you can see it, but I can tell you that that's what's being echoed now. So, just kind of speaking about preaching to the converted versus expanding empathy and action from other members of different communities. How do you think you use your voice to bring allies to the table?
Mm, mm. So the allies question is also a very interesting one, because in my book, I talk about the idea that allies must turn to accomplices in order
Mm,
for them to truly, truly be helpful in the movement. And I have a lot of people say, well, when you say accomplice, what does that mean? It really means being one that is willing to take the same sacrifice that I will take, right?
right,
To put themselves in the same exact situation that I would put myself in, because we're fighting on the same level for
right,
justice. We both believe that justice is that important, right? Often you have people who come to the movement and they're like, okay, I'm here, it's Saturday, I'm going to rally with you. But Sunday through Friday, they do absolutely nothing in their
mm,
workspace, in their own families, as I constantly say, and within their own lives, their everyday lives, to make a difference. They don't really, they don't mind coming out to a protest, because yes, sure, they believe in the fight, but they're not going to put themselves in harm's way. They're not about to get uninvited from Thanksgiving dinner because they spoke out against their grandmother
right.
using derogatory terms to make reference to Black folks and to people of color. They're not about to say to their husband that it is not right that you're running a business and not paying the Black women and or Black men who work for you the proper wages, right? They're not going to speak out if they are in the human resources department and they see people of color being passed up for jobs and for opportunities, while their white counterparts are moving faster and getting more positions of power when they're not even qualified all the time over a Black person or a brown person who's up for these same positions, right?
Right.
They're not going to put themselves in that situation, because ultimately, yes, I believe Black lives matter, but I don't believe that Black lives matter more than my job or my comfort or my income,
Right.
or or what have you. And so the issue of allies is and accomplices is really important. Just like intersectionality is important to bring movements together, allies and accomplices are what keep the movement together, right?
Hmm.
That's what makes people continue to show up. So when you ask about my voice, I don't know that my voice always, well, I take that back. My voice does seem to bring people over, but it takes them a while to get past the sting of the truth, because I'm not
Mm,
someone that's going to mince my words in order to make other people feel comfortable. If I'm invited into a room, if I'm invited into a conversation, many of the people I work with are afraid to say white women or to speak
mhm,
about how white women's tears and how white women have harmed other women of color, right? They're
right.
afraid to have that conversation, but I run towards it, because if I can't say it, who can and who will, right? And so it doesn't always feel good, but what I find is that people come back and they want more, and they say, well,
Mhm.
I don't really appreciate this or that, or why do you have to be so divisive? And I say, well, you say it's divisive, I say it's being a truth teller, because you're not saying that what I'm saying is untrue. You're just saying that the fact that I'm saying it is hurting your feelings.
Right,
And
right.
those conversations often cause people to go, hmm,
Mhm.
maybe I'm looking at this wrong, and so I hope that that's one reason why my voice and my sometimes courage, because I don't want to give the impression that I'm not shaking in my boots when I have to have these conversations. I don't always want to be the one in the room that has
Mm.
to say the thing that I know is going to upset people. I don't always want to do that. But because of the fact that people are attracted to what I have to say and the movement that I am helping to lead, I unfortunately am put in situations all the time when I have to speak for other women of color who are sitting in the same room. They're with you every day. I was invited by another corporation to speak for something during Black History Month. And before the event, there were about 6 women within the company who found a way to reach me on social media because they didn't want to send an email through their email system. They didn't want to get in touch with me in any way that their company would find out. But they called me behind the scenes through my social media to ask me to have a call with them about the internal issues that they are facing, that they wanted to be addressed, but they were
Wow.
afraid to ask the questions in public. And that's happened to me more
Wow.
than once. And I had a call with them and got an understanding of what they're going through. And they literally were depending on a speaker, a Black History Month speaker, to help bring forward the problems that they were experiencing in the workplace. So
Wow.
it's a back to your thing about the calling. They may never call me back again, because once they gave me the go ahead and they were like, we got this problem, none of us are getting promoted, we're being
Wow.
paid less than our counterparts. We've got 2 white women that are supervisors here who say racist things to us. I mean, they were experiencing such hell. So when I was finished, first of all, researching the problems with the company that I could bring up as examples of why they had racist practices, and then talking about some of their internal issues and I made sure to talk about it as in, these are issues that many Black women are experiencing in companies across the whole country. This is not just said company. When it was
Right.
all said and done, I said, well, they'll never invite me back again. And now they've hired me to do 3 workshops.
Wow.
So it ended up working out because the company knew they had issues, which is why they called me. But sometimes the fear of getting started is what stops them from even moving forward, because they're so used to a certain way of doing business. But I think, to your point, the whole world knows that something different has to happen. It's just that the idea of loosening the reins of power is so
Mhm.
scary, even to people who seemingly are the most confident and most powerful in the world.
Right. Right. No, I totally get that. And I feel like when we look at the history of activism and the people who spoke out, you know, it has mostly been men. Like, this is not this we yes, we do have some
Absolutely.
strong female activists that have paved
Absolutely.
the path for us and our voice to rise to the top, but it has been primarily men. So I'm curious to see if you've had to deal with biases within that, because I mean, here you are, an amazing Black woman who is being, becoming the voice, or is the voice for so many. And, many of them may feel as though their voice is either lessened or less
Mm-hmm.
heard. So
Mm-hmm.
how
Mm-hmm.
do you
Mm-hmm.
combat have you faced it? Have you seen it? And how do you combat that bias?
Yeah, so the movement, people have this impression that somehow social justice, civil rights is different from every other interaction we have with humans every day. It's not. It's very much so the same.
Right.
You have people who are working within a particular industry, who have lived and exist based upon some of the very same ideologies that you might find in sports, in entertainment, in any area of life, right? So patriarchy is a real thing. We experience
Mm-hmm.
it every single day within the movement as well. And trust and believe that patriarchy does not mean a man is doing something oppressive to a woman. It means that there are ideologies and a mentality that exists that many people can uphold, including women, against other women, right? Like this is a mindset, right? And so we experience it every day. I can give you one very good example. We have in our society this idea that a movement means one male figure at the helm,
Mm-hmm.
and everybody follows what that man says. So right now in our movement, there are women leading in every area. There are women leading in the mass incarceration space. There are women leading in, every space. I could go on with a list of women who are doing amazing work. And yet
Mm-hmm.
I see on a regular basis people asking, where are our leaders? We don't have leaders. I see it every day.
Wow.
We don't have leaders. There's actual debates that people are having online and in different spaces where they are questioning where are the leaders of today, because they are so very much so attracted to the idea of one male leader who
Mm-hmm.
everyone follows and listens to what that man says. They are stuck in the Dr. King, specifically the Dr. King model, which we
Right.
needed at that time. We needed Dr. King, and we celebrate Dr. King. But there are many Dr. Kingettas who exist today. And again, oftentimes we go unseen and unheard because we are not male. And
Right.
so that's very difficult. It doesn't stop us because we know that this is the time of women, and particularly Black women, to lead. And we've always been there, because if you think about the movement in the 60s,
Mm-hmm.
we having technical issues? Oh, okay, because I saw it get fuzzy. I'm sorry. Okay, so when we think about the 60s, right? And I'll just give you a lighter example. Dr. King is speaking and giving, he
Uh-oh. I think we've had some there we go. We're
It
back.
was. There
Thank
was. I knew
you.
something was happening all of a
Yeah.
sudden. But anyway, so just a lighter example. So Dr. King is speaking at the March on Washington in '68, and he's given his speech that I'm sure he's prepared. This is a big moment. There's more than 250,000 people there, and he's speaking and getting into his thing. And the speech is good, but it's not moving the crowd, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there is a woman who we all know and love, who Dr. Well, not Doctor, but Mahalia Jackson, who
Mm-hmm.
is there standing right. And this video, this is not something I'm making up. This is actually documented in history. Mahalia Jackson had heard him give the I Have a Dream speech. That was not a new speech, I Have a Dream. He had said that many times in many places. But at the March on Washington, he was not specifically giving that speech. He was saying some other stuff, very important: jobs, justice, the whole thing. Mahalia notices that he is not moving the crowd the way that he needs to in this moment. And she yells out to him, Dr. King, tell him about the dream. Martin,
Mm.
tell him about the dream. Tell him about the dream. And he begins to give the I have a dream speech. And now this is a world renowned message that we all,
Yes.
every single one of us know, claim and recite. This is a woman who, in the moment, helped Dr. King to, come with the right word to inspire the
Yes.
people. But she will never, ever, ever be in history as the person who turned that moment into one of the most inspirational moments of our lifetime. She's
Absolutely.
not going to receive that credit. Not that Dr. King and his family and others won't give it to her, but it's a footnote in history. It is
Mhm.
not a strong and powerful story. And some people may say, okay, so she told him to change his speech. Maybe to some, it's not important. But to me, I understand that women have done that and other things to help shepherd the movement and bring people together and over time. And yet we never, ever receive the type of credit
That's right.
that we deserve. And so, yes, it is difficult. It's difficult. And I sit in many spaces. Yes, I'm in the movement, but I'm also a consultant. I'm also, as I said, a writer. I have many spaces that I'm in, and I see at every turn where we, particularly as Black women, have to
Mhm.
fight for the recognition that we deserve.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Listen, I've grown up hearing, I know all of us have, behind every great man is a great woman or a strong woman. And
Absolutely.
and as much as I hear it and can appreciate it, I don't want that to be our message. I
I
think it should
know.
be
Right.
alongside every great man
That's right.
is a great or greater woman who is
That's
pushing the
right.
movement
That's
along
right.
with them. I mean, I think that should be the message, which is interesting because for this Women's History Month, it's all about breaking the bias, right? We all want to break these biases that we face as
Yeah.
women in whatever struggle that we are fighting. And so, you said a couple of things that I think is really interesting about how you fill so many different hats, right? And so, we look at you as an activist, yes. Some of us definitely have seen you as a mom as well. As a matter of fact, you and I share a distinct pleasure and honor of being moms of Black boys, right?
Yes.
And but you're also an influencer. You have become like this, your viral speech, the movement with the Women's March. You have become someone that people want to tap into, that brands want to tap into. They want to lean into your voice and in your power. But with that being said, we also know that being an influencer and working with brands means that you have an opportunity to benefit from that, right? And so people kind of
Mhm.
sometimes look at that as well. Well, if you're an activist, how can you be an influencer? If you're, how do you toe that line? And so that's my question to you. How do you create that balance? How do you toe that line of being an activist, being true to yourself, and being an influencer?
So first of all, I think everybody should make as much money as they can. I do
Hello.
believe sort of in the Bernie Sanders theory that we probably don't need $1 billion or more. That's probably excessive. So I
Yeah.
support that. However, I believe that people should make money. I don't think that any one of us should be ashamed to make money and to have resources and generational wealth for our families.
Right.
I think that is an old school mindset that we need to kill. We need to have a funeral for people believing that just because you make money, somehow means that you are not able to be authentically
Right.
in your work, right? So let's just put that
Yep.
at the top of the list. Now we come down from there. Dr. King died broke,
Mm.
right? Dr. King died very, very sad and heavy. Um, when I think about it, it makes me a little emotional all the time because here is a man who he had, he changed the world. I mean, that's it.
Right.
Like, right? Dr. King changed the entire world. And yet his family did not have the resources that they needed to continue his legacy in the
Right.
ways in which they should be able to. They still are out here raising money and
Yeah.
trying their best to keep his legacy going, right? And they should have more resources. We should be pouring in money to the King Center, where Bernice
Yeah.
King, Dr. Bernice King, is there leading, and other efforts that his family members are leading. That should not be our story. And I think where many people are confused or feel, or they may be conflicted with this idea that social media and access to individuals, to our people, has changed. There was a time, and Harry Belafonte always says this, and to be clear, people with money were always somewhere, because Harry Belafonte and his wealth is what helped Dr. King while he was alive. And in
Wow.
fact, Harry Belafonte was actually funding the movement, right? And that was
Mm-hmm.
because he was doing shows, he was in movies. We know Harry,
Mm-hmm.
and he just had his 95th birthday. So God bless and long live Harry
Yes.
Belafonte. Um, so that there was money there, always has to be. There's no way that anybody can survive without being able to have resources. Now, in my organization, Until Freedom, we don't take corporate money, especially for general operating expenses. So we don't
Mm-hmm.
just take $1 million check from said company so that we can survive every day. Our survival comes from the individual donations of
Yes.
people who look just like you. That's how we stay 10 toes down in our work and able to speak truth to power and not be worried
Mm-hmm.
about people pulling the plug. If a corporation comes along and says, "Oh, I see you guys are doing this event and we want to be supportive of the event," we will work with them, but we will not take the money for them to have say so, if you will, over what we're doing within our organization's business. I think that's a big balance in that. But
Mm-hmm.
as just an everyday person, most of the corporations that call me, they know exactly who I am. When I got, when I was invited through an ad agency to be a part of the Cadillac commercial, which some people went completely crazy over. But nonetheless, when I was invited to be a part of that, they didn't call me so they could give me words to say. They called me because of who I am and what I represent. And I think that is, and I also understand the nervousness and the trepidation, if you will, that some people have, because they have seen so many of our leaders change and
Yes.
shift, right? They start one way, and the next thing they're in, they're not this, they're not speaking and doing the things that people really believe that this is what we wanted you for. Like, you were the
Right.
voice, and now your voice has been compromised. All I can say is that I'm me, and I'm going to continue to be me. And I am working every day to create pathways for my family not to have to work, not to, and they will have to work, because they're going to have to work for our businesses,
Right.
but not to have to work in environments that compromise who they are.
Yeah.
That's something that I'm going to always do. So I don't
Right.
know. And people are going to either have to get over it, or, they may not work. They may not support me. And guess what? Someone said to me the other day, a few people that don't support you, they are not a part of the other 7 billion people around this whole globe that you can connect with that may support you. So you just
Absolutely.
have to balance it also by not just taking any money that comes to you, because I don't do that,
Right.
but also by understanding that you're never going to please everybody.
Right. You really bring up a good point of support, because specifically when we're talking about support from, from other women, and just the stresses that you go through in being an activist, and balancing being an influencer as well. So I grabbed this, this piece of part of your book that I was reading that really spoke to me again, like just from you as an author, but also from a personal level. Um, and you said, I step in the streets to protest in the pursuit of justice. There are moments along that pursuit that I feel lonely. And
Mm.
You know, we were talking recently about women and our vulnerability and how we kind of pull a lot of that empathetic energy, yes, but also we have the burden on our
Mm,
shoulders and we
so
wear
much
it
of it.
every single day we wear it. So, you know, I'd love to know, you know, who supports you? Like, who are the people that get behind you and support you, not just in the movement, but support you as a friend, as a sister? How does that support look to you?
I have a major support system. My family members are first because they support me by not requiring of me to be everything all the time that I really should be as a daughter, as a sister, as an aunt, as a mother. As a
Mhm.
mother, my son has probably suffered the most because just yesterday, my niece mentions to me, she's like, "Yeah, I was waiting for my son to pick her up from school. She's 15. She's like, "Yeah, I was waiting for him to come and get me from school." And she's like, "But then he didn't come, so I just walked home." So I'm like, "What do you mean? He lives in Atlanta. We're in New York. What are you talking about?" I thought he was in Atlanta. The last time I spoke to him happened to be 2 a.m. the night before she's telling me this. And so I'm talking to him on the phone, and I know that's his apartment in the background. He must have had a flight the next day. And I
Wow.
thought to myself, wow, I don't know if I listened to him in that conversation about anything that he is going through or what his life was all about, because I was
Wow.
calling him, one, to chastise him about a bill that came here that I didn't understand how he got it, two, to tell him about what I was so frustrated about in my life, because he's my best friend, so I tell him
Right.
everything. And I don't know if I ever stopped to listen to his story, his situation.
Right.
And so he has suffered the most because he has
Mhm.
had so many times to find other ways to cope with life because his mother wasn't present. Of course, I have a great relationship with him. I talk to him. He's always been well taken care of, but it's the little details that have been sort of lost in the sauce, because of the constant movement and the need for me to be family to other families that are going
Right.
through severe trauma. So I don't even know, like that is I guess uh, a big part of the how my of the support system, because he didn't complain. He doesn't complain. There have
Mhm.
been moments when he's called me to the table and said, "Yo, like, I can't, like, yo,
As a
ma,
mom.
I
Right.
need you to slow down, and deal with these issues." And I'm like I come through like a bulldozer. When if the school called and said, he was a student at Morehouse, and if they
Mhm.
even think to email me that something is going on, when I come through, I'm not asking questions. I'm just laying it down the way a Black woman only can do. And
Right.
sometimes he's like, "Wow, like, you don't even know what I'm dealing with, and you're
Right.
coming at me this way." And I still don't change my tone, but I have been humbled enough to
Mhm.
know that I cannot always take the position with him that he that everybody else has to understand me, and I don't have to understand other people and their
Right.
situations. So I would say that's the first thing that's been the support system, that my family has given
Amazing.
me too much grace, way too much grace. And that doesn't, and let me just say, Vanessa, if they were a part of this conversation, they would say, that's true, but don't be so hard on yourself, because I do a lot for my family. I do as much as I can do to be supportive and helpful and show up in the places and spaces, but I don't personally feel it's enough. Right. And I
Right.
know they have those conversations with me behind the scenes. I mean, about me behind the scenes. Then I would say that the people I work with, Linda, my son, and Angelo,
Mhm.
particularly the three other co-founders of Until Freedom, we have a dependency on one another to be whole, right? So when
Mhm.
Linda's happy, I'm happy, because if she gets a house, or if she gets to go on a vacation, I'm
Mhm.
like so excited, because her happiness is mine, and the same for all of them. We feed one another with love, with support, with unconditional support. And then beyond that, we are so deeply entrenched in community that when we go to a place like Louisville, Kentucky, we fall in love with the residents from that community, right?
Right.
They become our family. And so that's different from work. That's your life,
Mhm.
finding the local juke joint in a particular town and eating, mama's fried chicken, that
Yeah.
warms your soul. But
Yeah.
with all of that being said, there are days when I walk into my house and it's just me by myself, and I have a moment to sit down and think about the fact that I am so busy fighting white supremacy and fighting against oppression and fighting all of these challenges that we face, that I don't always feel like I'm pouring enough into the things that I would do if I wasn't in this work. The
Right.
dreams that I've had that haven't been manifested because there is no way for me to be on the road every single day working here and there, and then also having my big event planning firm that I always wanted to have. It's no way. I can't handle the details of, $1 million event when
Right.
I'm on the phone talking to whoever's family.
Mhm.
It is lonely and it is depressing, because if we did not have to deal with white supremacy and racism, then Until Freedom would be out of business. I wouldn't have an
Mhm.
organization.
Right. 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 So you've got your partners, you've got your family, um,
And I've got my
what,
homegirls.
and you got your homegirls.
And I've
Yeah,
got my
I wanted to
homegirls.
talk about like how much sisterhood and the importance of having women in
Yeah.
your life that help put you on a pedestal. But you know what? Before we do that, I just want to share really quickly something about you as a woman and as a sister. Um, I remember a few years back, we were at a retreat together. And it was the day that we found out that Eric Garner's killer was going to be fired by the NYPD. And as Tamika mentioned, like there's so many different people that have different movements. I have one that I've been working with for years. She's got one that she's in, several that she's been working with for years. In that moment that decision came down, I distinctly remember looking across the table at you. I think both of us had our phones at the same time and received messages at the same time. And when it came through, you got up. We all got up. We both got up and just, went to the middle of the room, and you embraced me in a
Mm,
way that made me realize, and this was, I think, our first real meeting with each other, like being with each other,
mm,
that
mm.
made me realize that we were really united in this fight and that
Right.
we were
Right.
united as
Right.
sisters. It
Right.
meant
Right.
so much to me. And
Mm,
since then, that sisterhood, that bond has grown so much.
mm,
It is my absolute honor um,
mm.
and pleasure to support you. Um, and we're going to do actually something coming up with the women of Ben, where we talk about how we honor them. And I want to talk about that a little bit. I want to talk about how the women around you honor you.
Yeah. Well, you guys are annoying, first of all, because all I want to do is get in my bed and put my furry slippers on and feel sorry for myself and eat. And that's it. And you
Well, we
guys,
won't
you
let you.
ladies, oftentimes pull me out of these places of depression and darkness that I get in and make me still like just remember my own beauty. Forget about what I'm doing in the work. It's sometimes just having people remind you that you don't look like a sweatsuit and a march and
Right,
pavement, right? Like
right,
you actually are a person.
right.
And being able to allow me to cry, laugh, joke, and just be myself, that's life-saving. It's
Yeah,
life-saving. And I think you all know when I'm like disappearing, because it's like, all right, we haven't heard from you. It's been a
yeah.
while. Like, what's going on? And I know that many of my sisters, when certain things happen, someone is killed, or there's brutality, or there is some bad ruling, they know to start reaching out, because they know that I, as an empath, like, I'm taking it into my heart, and it
Yes.
hurts my soul, and they know that. So it's like I start to immediately get the annoying text messages from 100 different women saying, "You guys fought a good fight. Hey
Yeah.
sis, are you okay? I just saw the news about this. How's your heart? Where are you? I'll come. I'll send food." I just think about our mutual friend Nakia McLean, and how many, when my mom had a stroke, the
Yeah.
food coming to the hospital, the flowers, and what we do for all of us.
That's
Anybody has
right.
a flood in their house, a sickness, or this or that, a ticket that needs to be purchased for an event, even if we don't show up, we do that for one
Yes.
another. And I have many sisters that invest in me in that way. And it literally has saved my life so many times, because this world in general, and that's not just dealing with systemic racism and oppression, but just, regular life. What
Yeah.
happened when I went outside today? Anything can trigger emotions that are not always healthy. And what
Yeah.
is amazing is when you have people that deposit into you, so that when everything else is taking and pulling, you have people that are there, and particularly women, to give so much. And that's probably been the thing that so many times over, I didn't know I needed it until after the healing process happened,
Yeah.
until I got it together. Then I'm like, wow, 3 months ago, I was completely in shambles. What happened? And I start recalling the moments that I spent with you guys, the dinner, the talks, the calls. And then I realized that the restoration came from the contact with other women who truly love me. So that
Yes.
sisterhood is important. And I can tell you, that whole no new friends, and I'm not friends with women, throw that out, because
Yeah.
God knows I have some of the best in my life.
Yes, and we absolutely love you, and you know this. I know you know this. So with that, talking about how women can support women, as we're wrapping this up, one of the things that we want to do at Ben is allow our women to support each other and honor each other. And we're actually doing something on International Women's Day, which is coming up on March 8th, where we're all asking the women of the company to share something, honoring a coworker that means a lot to them. It's something that we do with each other often, but not often enough, and we want to
Not
promote
often
that.
enough.
So what I'm doing actually is, we're asking the women of Ben to honor each other, in a post through social media, because this is how we share things, right? And I am actually raffling off some of these books that I bought. Talk about support. I support my sister all the time, and I love her so much.
Thank you.
State of
Thank you.
Emergency. We're raffling off, or not raffling. We're giving away 3 books for the women, randomly, to women who participate in this. So if you're a woman who
Wow.
is, yeah, if you're a woman who is a woman of Ben, know that you can get a copy of this book if you participate in our upcoming social push for women. But I can't do that without first honoring you. You're the first woman I'm going to honor, and I'm going to share with you the reason why I honor you, Tamika. I honor you because your heart is bigger than anyone's I have ever met in my life.
Mm,
I honor you because you won't stop.
mm,
I honor you because you are fearless. You are strong. I breathe the energy that you give us day in, day out. Smile pops up on my face when you text me and say, "Hey, sis." It means so much to me. I honor our sisterhood. I
mm.
honor the journey that we're on together. And I
Yeah.
absolutely love you. Thank you so much for being a part of
Oh,
this.
no, you don't get to say
Okay.
that and not have me say that I honor you as well. I just remember even before we were at that retreat, knowing about you and your work. And I just, there's a very sensitive place in my heart for my son, for a Black boy, for Black men in general, and knowing that you are helping to lead a movement that, really claims space for our boys. It's been special to me. You are a very, very special person, Vanessa, and you and this company, as well as all the people you come into contact with every day. They don't necessarily, maybe they do know, they probably know better than me, because you work with them all the time, just how special it is to have someone like you in the mix. And I just want to encourage you and tell you, I see you, because I see you out there pulling people together and convening spaces and trying to make things happen, and sometimes being frustrated about the response or lack of response from folks. But just know that God is going to shine down on you forever, has been and will be. And also, history will record the work that you've done. And so I honor you as well. And I just want to say to all the women, men, and whomever else is listening of Ben, that you all have a special person in Vanessa, and love up on her, because you definitely need it. And you deserve it. I
Thank you.
love you so
Thank you.
much. Thank
I love you
you.
too. I appreciate you. Thank you so much. And everyone who's tuned in this week, know that we have more programming around diversity, equity, and inclusion for Ben. Stay tuned. We'll send these invites out. And thank you so much for joining us today. Until then,
Thank
bye.
you. Bye,
Thank
everyone.
you.